The crystal towers of Lumara gleamed under the light of 3 moons, their perfect geometric patterns reflecting countless stars. But in a small chamber at the edge of the city, Mira stood trembling before her mirror, watching helplessly as her body betrayed her once again. The crystals growing from her shoulders and arms refused to form the proper 6-sided patterns that marked her people. Instead, they spiraled and twisted in wild, irregular shapes that seemed to mock the very foundation of their society. A society built on order, perfection, and conformity. "Please, not today," she whispered, running her fingers over the rough edges of her latest growth. Today was her final assessment, her last chance to prove she could control her crystalline form like every other member of her species. The walk to the grand chamber felt endless. Other Lumarans passed her in the corridors, their perfect crystal formations catching the light like living prisms. Some turned away when they saw her approaching, while others stared openly at her twisted formations. She had grown used to their reactions over the years, but today each glance felt like a physical blow. The Council of Elders sat in their crystal thrones, 5 perfect beings whose forms had not changed in centuries. Their symmetrical patterns represented everything Mira had failed to achieve. "Step forward, Mira of House Light," the first elder commanded, his voice resonating through the chamber like the ring of pure crystal. Mira moved to the center of the room, where light from above would illuminate every imperfection in her form. She tried one last time to force her crystals into proper alignment, but they only twisted further, creating spiral patterns that had never been seen before in their species. "We have watched your development for 20 cycles," the second elder spoke, her perfect geometric patterns gleaming. "We have provided the finest teachers, the most advanced treatments, and still you persist in this aberration." "I try," Mira said, her voice barely a whisper. "Every day I try." "Trying is not enough," the third elder cut in. "Our society is built on perfection. Each of us must reflect the divine geometry that governs the universe. Your continued existence in this form threatens the very foundation of our beliefs." The first elder rose, his crystals catching the light in dazzling patterns. "Mira of House Light, we have reached our decision. You have failed to achieve the basic standards required of our people. You are hereby stripped of your house name and citizenship. You will be given basic supplies and transported to Waypoint 9, where you may live among the lesser species who do not understand the importance of perfection." Mira's legs nearly gave out. Exile. The worst punishment imaginable for her people. To be cast out, to live among aliens who couldn't even form crystals. It was a fate worse than death for most Lumarans. "Please," she begged, "give me more time. I'll work harder. I'll find a way to control it." "The decision is final." All 5 elders spoke in unison, their voices creating a harmonic resonance that made the chamber sing. "You have until sunrise to gather your possessions and report to the transport bay." That night, as Mira packed the few belongings she was allowed to take, she caught her reflection one last time in her crystal walls. The spirals and whorls that had doomed her seemed to glow with their own inner light, creating patterns she had never noticed before. For just a moment, she thought they were beautiful. But such thoughts were dangerous. They were the kind of thoughts that had led to her exile in the first place. As the transport ship lifted off the next morning, carrying her away from the only home she had ever known, Mira watched the crystal spires of Lumara shrink into the distance. She didn't know what waited for her at Waypoint 9, but she knew one thing with certainty: she would never see these perfect towers again. The stars stretched into lines as the ship entered hyperspace, carrying her toward an uncertain future among the imperfect beings her people so despised. Waypoint 9 was nothing like home. Where Lumara had been all gleaming crystal and perfect geometry, the space station was a maze of rusty corridors and flickering lights. The air smelled of machine oil and too many species crammed into too little space. Mira stood in her tiny quarters, if you could call them that. The room was barely larger than a storage closet, with a hard cot and a single window looking out into the void of space. Her few possessions sat in a small bag, untouched since her arrival 3 days ago. The crystal formations on her body dimmed in response to her mood, their spiraling patterns casting weak shadows on the metal walls. She had to find work soon. The meager credits the council had given her wouldn't last long, and no one here would care if she starved. Gathering her courage, Mira stepped out into the crowded main corridor. Aliens of all shapes and sizes pushed past her. Scaled merchants from the trading worlds, tentacled engineers, even a few plasma-based beings floating in containment suits. None of them spared her more than a glance, though some stepped back when they noticed her crystalline nature. Her people's reputation for coldness and superiority had preceded her. The station's job board was a chaotic mix of holograms and paper notices, nothing like the orderly systems of home. Mira scanned the listings, her heart sinking. Most required skills she didn't have or certifications she'd never needed on Lumara. Looking for work? A gravelly voice asked. Mira turned to find a four-armed maintenance worker studying her. Cargo bay's always hiring. Pays bad, works worse, but it's something. She nodded gratefully, trying to hide how her crystals dimmed further at the thought of manual labor. On Lumara, she had been training to be a resonance architect. Now she would be loading boxes. The cargo bay was chaos incarnate. Crates and containers stretched as far as she could see, while workers of various species rushed back and forth with loaders and anti-grav sleds. The foreman, a burly being with thick gray skin, looked her up and down skeptically. "You sure you're up for this? Your kind usually don't do well with physical work." "I need the credits," Mira said simply. "I'll learn." Learn she did, though every muscle screamed by the end of her first shift. Her crystalline body, built for precision and beauty, struggled with the heavy lifting. Other workers avoided her at first, whispering about that stuck-up crystal when they thought she couldn't hear. But Mira persisted. Day after day, she returned to the cargo bay. Her crystals grew duller, covered in the grime of honest work. She learned to operate the loaders, to read cargo manifests, to navigate the complex system of shipping lanes that kept the station alive. Weeks passed. Her quarters remained sparse, but she could afford food now. Simple meals from the station's countless food stalls became her window into other cultures. She discovered she had a taste for spicy Centaurian noodles, though they made her crystals pulse with strange colors for hours afterward. Some nights, standing by her window, she would catch glimpses of her reflection. The wild, spiraling patterns that had marked her as defective among her people seemed different here. In the harsh station lighting, they almost looked like the swirling nebulae visible in the distance. One evening, as she was finishing a late shift, she overheard two of her coworkers talking. "That crystal worker, the quiet one, she's different from the others I've met." "Yeah, never thought I'd see one of them getting their hands dirty. No airs about her, just works hard." Mira felt her crystals pulse slightly brighter at their words. It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was something. Here on Waypoint 9, among the outcasts and wanderers of 1,000 worlds, perhaps being different wasn't the worst thing after all. But survival wasn't the same as living, and each night as she lay on her hard cot, Mira wondered if this was all her future held. Endless shifts in the cargo bay, watching ships come and go, carrying others to better lives among the stars. The day that changed everything started like any other on Waypoint 9. Mira was in Loading Bay 7, helping to unload a shipment of rare minerals when the Star Cruiser arrived. It wasn't the biggest ship she'd seen, but something about its weathered hull and patched panels spoke of countless adventures among the stars. As the ship docked, Mira noticed it wasn't following standard procedures. The pilot had come in at an odd angle, and she could hear the engines making an unusual whining sound. Her crystalline body resonated with the discord. Something was wrong. The cargo bay doors opened with a hiss, and out stepped a human. He was tall for his species, with graying hair and a face lined from years of space travel. His worn leather jacket bore patches from a dozen different ports, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who had seen it all. "Name's Jack," he said to the foreman. Got engine trouble. Need to offload some cargo while I handle repairs. Mira tried to focus on her work, but she kept finding her attention drawn to the human. Unlike the others who usually avoided looking at her, he seemed fascinated by her presence. Several times, she caught him watching her crystals as they caught the light. During the unloading, one of the cargo containers shifted unexpectedly. Mira's crystals pulsed with warning just before the massive crate began to fall. Without thinking, she pushed another worker out of the way, her crystalline body taking the brunt of the impact. The crash echoed through the bay. When the dust settled, Mira found herself surrounded by scattered cargo, her crystals glowing brightly from the surge of adrenaline. She expected to see fear or disgust on the faces around her. Her people's strength was not something they usually displayed so openly. Instead, Jack was grinning. "That was impressive," he said, helping her up. "Never seen crystals move like yours before. They're usually all rigid and geometric, but yours, they flow like water." Mira instinctively tried to dim her crystals, to hide their irregular patterns. "They're defective. That's why I'm here." "Defective?" Jack laughed. "Lady, you just saved someone's life with those defects. Where I come from, that's called being extraordinary." He studied her for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Listen, I could use someone with your talents. My engineer just jumped ship at our last stop, and I've got deliveries to make. How'd you like to see more of the galaxy than this rusty old station?" Mira's crystals pulsed with surprise. "You're offering me a job, but you don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you work hard. Been watching you all morning. I know you've got quick instincts and care about others. And I know those unusual crystal patterns of yours might come in handy with some of the weird situations we find ourselves in." He gestured to his ship. "She's not much to look at, but she's home. Crew quarters are small but private, pays better than what you're making here, and you'll get to see places most people only dream about. What do you say?" Mira looked around the cargo bay that had been her world for the past months. She thought about her tiny room, the endless shifts, the loneliness of being surrounded by people but never truly being seen. "Why would you trust me? My own people didn't want me." Jack's expression softened. "Here's something you learn after a few decades in space. Sometimes the people who don't fit in where they came from make the best crew. We're all misfits on my ship. That's what makes us family." Her crystals brightened involuntarily, creating patterns that danced across the cargo bay walls. For the first time since her exile, Mira felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. "When do we leave?" she asked. Jack's smile widened. "As soon as I fix that engine. Want to help?" The engine room of Jack's ship was a stark contrast to the pristine machinery Mira was used to on Lumara. Tools were scattered across workbenches, and patches of different metals covered the walls like a metallic patchwork quilt. Yet somehow, it all worked together in its own chaotic way. "First rule of space travel," Jack said as he handed her a wrench. "Nothing ever works exactly like it's supposed to. You've got to learn to improvise." Mira's crystals dimmed slightly with uncertainty. Improvisation was not something her people valued. Everything on Lumara had its proper place, its correct function. But here she was, learning to repair an engine that seemed to defy every engineering principle she knew. "See that power coupling?" Jack pointed to a glowing component. "It's vibrating at the wrong frequency. That's what's causing the whine in the engines." Mira moved closer, and something unexpected happened. Her irregular crystal patterns began to resonate with the engine's vibrations. Without thinking, she reached out, letting her crystals tune themselves to the machinery. "Fascinating," Jack muttered, watching as her crystals pulsed in rhythm with the engine. "You're actually synchronizing with it, aren't you?" This shouldn't be possible," Mira whispered. "Our crystals are meant for architecture, for art, not for this. Maybe that's why your patterns are different. You're evolving, adapting." Jack's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Can you feel what's wrong with it?" Mira closed her eyes, letting her crystals guide her. The frequency is off by 0.3 degrees if we adjust the magnetic field. Working together, they spent hours fine-tuning the engine. Jack taught her the basics of human engineering, messy, practical solutions that would have horrified her former teachers. But they worked, and with each successful repair, Mira felt her confidence grow. The rest of the small crew gradually began to accept her presence. There was Tom, the gruff navigator who secretly left astronomy books in her quarters, and Lisa, the medic who was fascinated by her crystal biology. Even Rex, the ship's ancient maintenance bot, seemed to develop a fondness for her, beeping happily whenever her crystals lit up the corridors. But trust didn't come easily. Each night, alone in her new quarters, Mira waited for the other shoe to drop. Her people had thrown her away. Surely these humans would do the same once they tired of her strangeness. One evening, as they sat in the ship's small common area sharing a meal, Jack noticed her crystals had dimmed to an almost gray color. "What's troubling you?" he asked quietly after the others had left. "Why are you all being so kind to me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "I'm defective, dangerous. My own people couldn't trust me to maintain basic geometric patterns. How can you trust me with your ship, your crew?" Jack was silent for a long moment, studying her with those keen eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained walls. "Let me tell you something about humans," he finally said. "We're all defective, by your people's standards. None of us are perfect geometric shapes. We're messy, complicated, always changing. But that's our strength." He gestured around the ship. "Look at this old girl. Every patch, every repair, every modification makes her unique, makes her ours. Your crystals might not form perfect patterns, but they let you understand this ship in ways none of us can. That's not a defect. That's a gift." Mira's crystals pulsed with emotion, creating swirling patterns that reflected off the metal walls. "But what if I make a mistake? What if I fail? Then you'll learn from it, and we'll be right here to help you up." Jack smiled. That's what family does. Family. The word echoed in her mind, making her crystals glow brighter than they had in months. Perhaps here, among these imperfect beings who valued adaptation over perfection, she could finally stop running from who she was. For the first time, Mira began to wonder if being cast aside by her people hadn't been a punishment after all, but a path to something better. 3 months into her new life aboard Jack's ship, alarms blared through the corridors. Mira jolted awake in her quarters, her crystals instantly pulsing with warning colors. "All hands to the bridge." Jack's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got a situation." Mira ran through the corridors, her crystalline form casting dancing shadows on the walls. When she reached the bridge, she found the crew already assembled, their faces lit by the ominous red glow of emergency lights. "Solar storm," Tom announced from the navigation console, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by genuine concern. "A big one. Came out of nowhere. Must have been masked by that nebula we were skirting." Through the view screen, Mira could see it, a massive wall of plasma and radiation, rolling toward them like a tide of liquid fire. Her crystals resonated with the raw energy emanating from the storm, creating patterns she'd never seen before. "Can we outrun it?" Lisa asked, gripping her medical kit tightly. Jack shook his head. "Engines still not at full power after that last repair. We'll never clear the storm's radius in time." "What about the shields?" Mira asked, her crystals flickering faster as she processed the danger. "They're not rated for something this big," Tom replied. "We're looking at total systems failure if that hits us." Mira felt her crystals pulse in rhythm with the ship's struggling engines. Since learning to sync with the machinery, she'd developed an almost intuitive understanding of the vessel's systems. Now that connection was telling her something. "The shield harmonics," she said suddenly. "They're wrong for this type of storm." Jack turned to her. "What do you mean?" "On Lumara, we use crystalline matrices to protect our cities from solar flares. The geometry of the shield has to match the wave pattern of the incoming energy. Her crystals began to glow brighter as understanding dawned. Your shields are trying to block the storm. They need to deflect it instead. Can you modify them? Jack asked, not hesitating to trust her judgment. I think so, but Mira's crystals dimmed slightly. I'll have to interface directly with the shield generator. My people never used their crystals this way. It could be dangerous. More dangerous than that storm hitting us. Lissa asked softly. Jack put a hand on Mira's shoulder. It's your call. We trust you. Those 3 words made her crystals pulse with determination. Without further hesitation, Mira ran to the shield generator room. The massive machine hummed with power, its energy fields already starting to fluctuate as the storm's leading edge reached them. Mira placed her hands on the generator's main console. Her irregular crystal patterns began to glow intense blue as she synchronized with the ship's systems. Pain shot through her body. This was far more power than she'd ever tried to channel before. But instead of fighting the pain, she embraced it. Let her imperfect patterns guide the energy flow. The shields began to change, their rigid geometric pattern shifting into something more fluid, more like her own crystalline structure. The ship shuddered as the storm hit. Through her connection to the shields, Mira could feel the incredible forces trying to tear them apart. But her crystals kept adapting, kept flowing like water around the storm's fury. For 5 terrifying minutes, they rode the edge of destruction. Mira's consciousness merged with the ship's systems, her crystals glowing so bright they illuminated the entire room. She felt like she was being torn apart and reforged, just like the shields she was controlling. Then suddenly, it was over. The storm passed, leaving them battered but alive. Mira collapsed, her crystals dimming to a soft glow. She felt hands helping her up. Jack and the others had come running when the danger passed. You did it, Jack said softly. You saved us all. Looking down at her crystals, Mira saw they had changed. New patterns had emerged, more complex than ever before. But for the first time in her life, she felt no shame at their imperfection. These were the patterns that had saved her family. Word spread quickly through the space lanes. A crystalline exile using unorthodox patterns to save a ship from a solar storm was too remarkable a story to stay secret. Within weeks, the news reached Lumara, and the response was swift and predictable. The ship's communication system crackled to life one morning as Mira was helping Tom calibrate the navigation systems. The symbol that appeared on the screen made her crystals dim instantly. The Council of Elders. Mira, formerly of House Light, the first elder's voice filled the bridge, carrying the same perfect resonance she remembered. Your recent actions have come to our attention. Jack stood beside her, a reassuring presence, as she faced the transmission. You're speaking to a member of my crew, he said firmly. Show some respect. The elder's perfect crystalline form seemed to ripple with disapproval. We require her immediate return to Lumara for study. Her aberrant patterns have demonstrated unexpected utility. We must understand how this happened. Study. Mira's voice was quiet but steady. You mean dissection. You want to know how my defects saved this ship. Your understanding is irrelevant. Another elder joined in. This is not a request. We have already dispatched a vessel to retrieve you. Your current associates will be compensated for their loss. Jack's hand tightened on the back of her chair. She's not property to be compensated for. She's family. The word made Mira's crystals pulse with warmth, creating rippling patterns across the bridge. She noticed the elder's subtle flinch at the display of uncontrolled crystalline behavior. This is bigger than your small understanding, the first elder insisted. Her mutation could represent an evolutionary step for our species. We must study it, control it, perfect it. Perfect it. Mira stood, her crystals blazing with an intensity that surprised even her. Like you tried to perfect me, by forcing me into patterns that weren't mine, making me hate myself for being different. The elders' perfect faces showed no emotion, but their crystals vibrated with barely contained agitation. You dare speak to the council this way? I dare because I'm not afraid anymore. Mira felt the ship's crew gathering behind her, supporting her. You cast me out because I was imperfect. But these imperfect beings showed me what real perfection is. It's not about flawless geometry. It's about adaptation, growth, and acceptance. The Lumaran vessel will arrive within 2 days, the first elder said coldly. You will comply. No, I won't. Mira's crystals pulsed with each word. I renounce my claim to Lumara. I choose my new family. You cannot simply. Watch me. She turned to Jack. Captain, request permission to send a message to any other Lumaran outcasts who might be listening. Jack grinned. The comm system is yours. Mira faced the screen again, knowing her words would spread across the same networks that had carried news of her feat. To any Lumaran who has been cast out for being different. There's another way. Your defects are not flaws. They're evolution trying to break free from stagnation. You don't have to hide anymore. The elder's transmission cut off abruptly, but Mira kept speaking, her crystals creating beautiful, chaotic patterns that danced across the bridge. Find us. Jack's ship will be making regular stops at major waypoints. We'll help you discover what your unique patterns can really do. When she finished, Lisa was the first to break the silence. You know they'll try to force you back. Let them try, Jack said, his voice hard. They'll find out humans can be pretty creative when protecting our own. Mira looked around at her crew, her family, and felt her crystals glowing with a joy that would have scandalized her former people. We should get ready, she said. I have a feeling we're about to have a lot more crystalline refugees looking for a new home. Tom chuckled from his station. Good thing we've got the best crystal tech expert in the galaxy to help them out. For the first time, Mira fully embraced that title, letting her crystals shine with all their beautiful imperfection. 1 year after Mira's defiant stand against the Council, the outpost they called New Pattern hummed with life. Built on a small moon orbiting a gentle star, it had become a sanctuary for those who dared to be different. Through the crystalline dome of the main hall, Mira watched as a new arrival practiced controlling their unique formations. Like her, their crystals formed spirals and waves instead of geometric patterns. The young exile's face showed the same mix of fear and wonder she had felt when first discovering their abilities weren't flaws at all. You're getting better at teaching, Jack said, coming to stand beside her. The years hadn't changed him much, though the adventures they'd shared had added a few more gray hairs to his head. I had a good teacher myself, Mira replied, her crystals glowing warmly. Someone who showed me that different isn't wrong. The outpost had grown far beyond their initial hopes. 37 Lumaran outcasts now called it home, each with their own unique crystal patterns. Some could interface with technology in ways their homeworld had never imagined. Others could create art that brought tears to viewers' eyes. A few, like Mira, could do both. The Council's latest petition to the Galactic Alliance was rejected. Lisa announced, walking in with a datapad. They can't claim jurisdiction over defective citizens they legally exiled. Mira's crystals pulsed with satisfaction. The Council had tried everything to regain control over their outcasts. Threats, bribes, legal challenges. But they had underestimated the determination of those they had cast aside and the loyalty of their human allies. Did you ever imagine this? She asked Jack, gesturing to the thriving community around them. When you first offered me a job on your ship, honestly, no, he laughed. I just saw someone who deserved a chance. You did all this yourself, but Mira knew better. It had taken all of them. The crew who became her family, the humans who provided support and protection, and every brave exile who chose to seek a different path. In the center of the main hall stood their greatest achievement, a crystal matrix unlike anything seen before. It combined the unique patterns of every resident, creating a structure that was both beautiful and functional. It powered their systems, protected their home, and stood as a symbol of what was possible when difference was celebrated rather than feared. Another ship incoming. Tom's voice came over the comm. Looks like we got two more seeking sanctuary. I'll meet them, Mira said. She knew what they would need, not just shelter and training, but understanding. The knowledge that they weren't alone anymore. As she walked through the halls of New Pattern, her crystals casting ever-changing shadows on the walls, Mira reflected on how far she had come. From an exile scrubbing cargo bays to the leader of a movement that was changing her species' understanding of itself. The observation deck where new arrivals docked offered a perfect view of their home. The outpost's crystal spires didn't reach for geometric perfection like Lumura's towers. Instead, they flowed and curved, each unique pattern adding to the whole. Solar light caught in the crystalline structures, creating rainbow cascades that danced across the moon's surface. Ready to welcome some more family members? Jack asked, joining her at the window. Mira's crystals brightened in response. Family, she said, tasting the word that had changed everything for her. Yes, I think I am. As the new arrivals ship docked, Mira stood tall, her irregular crystal patterns glowing with pride. She wasn't just the exile who had been cast aside anymore. She was living proof that being different could be a gift, that imperfection could lead to evolution, and that sometimes the best family was the one you found among the stars. The future stretched before them, bright with possibilities. And somewhere out there, other outcasts were looking up at the stars, wondering if they too could find a place where their differences were celebrated. Thanks to one human's kindness and understanding, Mira could now tell them, yes, yes, you can.